Oops. Okay, we have attendees joining us now.
Awesome.
Mhm.
Let me know when you're ready.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining our Q&A session on how medicinal mushrooms can make all the difference for your pets. Today's Q&A session, we have our panelists with us. That's Carrie Hyde, owner of the SPAW, and Sean Zyer, co-founder of Earth Buddy Pets. I am your host and moderator, Lori Johnston, owner of Allied Exchange. I would like to go through some how-tos today for this Q&A session. And that is to let you have an understanding of how to present your questions for our attendees. So at the bottom of your screen, or it could be at the top, you will see a Q&A button that you will click on and ask your questions in writing. You also have a little icon for raising your hand if you have a question, during which time Carrie Hyde or Sean Zyer may be speaking or addressing a question. You can certainly click that. The little hand will show up in next to your name and we will see it. And this session is being recorded. It will be available afterwards as well, that you can go back and take a look at it at any time after this event. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. We did receive a question earlier from Imbal, and we would like to kick off the Q&A session with her question. Sean, would you like to start off? You are muted, Sean.
Sean, you're muted.
Sorry about that, everyone. Yeah, so the question was specifically in relation to a species called Agaricus blase and around canine IBD. And this can relate to just IBD in general for cats and dogs, because they both experience it quite a bit. And it's really hard to address. And she was asking about a specific species. And what I really want to stress with all mushrooms is they all have a prebiotic-like quality. And with so much, especially a lot of the viewers and a lot of the things that you guys stress with diet, Carrie, in terms of raw nutrition, there's a lot of emphasis and a lot of talk about probiotics. And I think sometimes those can be overused, because what we're doing is we're basically introducing new bacteria or good bacteria to the gut, but we're not really helping the body build its own good bacteria and ability to ward off some of that bad bacteria. So what mushrooms have is this prebiotic-like quality, and we're promoting a healthy gut microbiota. So regardless of the mushroom, it's going to have these prebiotic benefits. And so I would say if you're trying the Agaricus blase, that's a great one. Our thought process is using a blend or a mix of mushrooms, because they have a synergistic or entourage effect, which is really funny because we use that phrase a lot in the cannabis side or CBD side. So if we can get that entourage effect, I think that's the best way to do it. But if you want to start with one mushroom, just to incorporate into the food or however you're administering it. I think that's a great start, but you can always start mixing blends, and that's why we have a 5 blend in our product.
So I'm going to probably play the little bit of pet parent advocate here, in the sense of sometimes I know people who are listening might not understand some of the language we're using. So I'm going to back up just a little bit, Sean.
Yep.
Let's talk about IBD. What question he was responding to is about irritable bowel disease. And so that was the specific what we were talking about with IBD and whether or not that mushroom can help with IBD. I didn't read the question, but is that right, Sean? Was it a question?
Her dog was suffering from the IBD and she was trying to incorporate more natural things. The other thing that we can take into account with like IBD and some of these other issues is, when the pets are given antibiotics, that wreaks havoc on their gut microbiome. So we need to encourage good bacteria. And I really think prebiotics are a really healthy way, and with mushrooms having this prebiotic like quality, I think it's a great addition to kind of that gut support. When you talk about raw food too, raw food is raw. It's not broken down at all like a kibble or some of these other products. So the pet's ability to break that down and having good prebiotics in their diet and ability to break it down better, it's definitely going to help that process, especially if you're switching to raw.
Right. So another little side thing here. I don't know how many people are in. We have quite a few people in. I don't know how many people actually watched the podcast that Sean and I did. It's also available on YouTube. If you haven't had a chance to watch it, some of this might seem like it's a little, but you can jump in at any time and ask any questions you want. I'm going to help out a little bit as we go a little bit. So a prebiotic, when Sean's talking about prebiotics, he's talking about an easy way to think of it is it's food for your probiotic. And so that's what he's saying, how important it is that we can't just keep introducing, these bacteria without giving them something to grow on, and mushrooms help facilitate that. It's food for the bacteria. So you could potentially be offering your dog all sorts of good bacteria, and it's not really going to settle without us being able to feed it. You got to feed the fish, so to speak, if that makes any sense. Right?
Well, yeah, not just that. It's also going to encourage the growth of good bacteria and help ward off that bad bacteria naturally.
Right.
Whereas probiotics are basically you're introducing that bacteria into the gut, and they might not always need more good bacteria.
They might need prebiotics.
Correct.
And I think that happens a lot.
Yep.
So
we actually, sorry to interrupt. We actually have Ibal has raised her hand to ask, so I'm going to allow her to ask her questions, and then we also have some questions coming in at the chat Q&A.
Okay.
Go ahead, Ibal.
Hi, Ibal.
You are muted. You can unmute yourself.
Thank you for
There you
that.
go.
Okay.
There you go.
Hi.
Hi, guys. Thank you for your answer. I think what I was trying to say, perhaps if you could read my question to everybody else, they would understand what I was trying to focus on. It was not as much as prebiotics, and yes, I understand the value, but there were human trials done with that particular mushroom due to its compounds and beta-glucans that actually target cytokines that actually refer to the gut more than any other mushroom does. So if you know what, I think it's called Andosan, if I'm not mistaken, that is the form that is used for people, and it has shown up to 78% relief in IBD symptoms. So I wanted to hear about it mostly for its anti-inflammatory properties that are related to the gut, as opposed to its prebiotic, which I totally understand, and I've used that as a prebiotic as well. But that particular mushroom has done wonders in human world, and unfortunately not a lot of trials for canines. So that's what I was hoping you guys would address.
Yeah, so I guess from the standpoint of the active compounds in mushrooms, and specifically that one I'm not as familiar with. But what you're kind of alluding to is that there's these polysaccharide peptides that occur in the mushrooms, and this is not just Agaricus blase. All of them contain this. Another one that specifically we do use that contains these same properties are turkey tail. And turkey tail has a profound amount of research, both in human and pet. Excuse me, sorry, dropped my phone. And turkey tail specifically in dogs has shown some really cool stuff with cancer specifically, and the growth or metastases, I always mess that word up, with hemangiosarcoma in dogs, which is basically there's not a long shelf life once you get diagnosed with that. So what they saw with turkey tail is it did show some extension of survival. So really good results with that. Turkey tail, though, as a whole, predominantly most of the studies are showing this immune response that it's creating in the gut. And that's where you get the wealth of knowledge around turkey tail. So whether it's Agaricus blase or some of these other mushrooms, they're all going to have this immune modulating properties, and most of those responses happen in the gut.
I think and Bal, you bring up such a really, really good point. And that's one of the struggles we have. There's thousands of different types of mushrooms, but sadly with our canines, we don't get the same research. So, and we can't always say if it worked for humans, it worked for pets, right? We've seen that there's certain things, chocolate is an example, we can eat it, pets can't eat it. So we do have to be careful. We can't just say, just because it's a mushroom, it's going to be fine because it's been tested on humans. But that is what Sean's trying to say, is that there's some that have been tested that have the same components as what you're talking about, but it may be a mushroom that has had more research towards the animals. But it is so hard for us to find and get more studies on animals because there's not a lot of money to be made. So it makes it difficult. So I always encourage people to make sure that whatever mushrooms you are using are some that have been studied for dogs, and we make sure that we're not giving them something solely because it's worked on humans. I'm not familiar with that mushroom either, but I'm not a mushroom expert like Sean is, but
I've seen it in other products, and a lot of the powders that you will find at the grocery store are typically pet safe. I mean, if they're edible mushrooms, as long as they are cooked, they should be fine for most pets. The wild mushrooms is obviously the one that we have to be a little bit more concerned about.
May I ask, Ibal, did that clarify your question for you? And also, Fiona, your question on talking to the immune modulating effects of mushrooms for autoimmune diseases like IBD, did that address your question as well?
Should I speak, Lori?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay.
Yep.
Yes, to an extent, because like Carrie was saying, unfortunately, there's not a lot of not many studies have been done on canines. There's just a lot of research that I do, and I read a lot. I actually came across it. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Five Leaf Botanic up in Canada. They do end of life treatments for dogs, mainly with heart disease and things like that. So one of the naturopath is fantastic, and she actually raised that up with my dog. And that's how I got onto that. And I've noticed that, like Sean was saying, is that you would see it in quite a few canine products. And she also recommended a couple of, I think two companies where I should try and contact them. So when I saw this live, I was like, okay, Sean has got to know.
Yeah.
So I'll address you guys. But like I said, I totally understand the notion that there's not a lot of research on it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ibal. I'm going to go ahead and move back so that we can address other questions, if that's okay.
while we're waiting for that, we're waiting for the next question to come up. For those of you who haven't listened to the podcast or watched that episode before this question possibly comes up, we are definitely not talking about any kind of psychedelic mushrooms. These are all safe medicinal mushrooms that we're talking about and have no effect on your dogs. I keep bringing that up in everything that we talk about because it's concerning, and people, think that we're going to be getting their dogs. Uh-oh, did I lose you guys?
No,
there it
you're
is.
with us, Carrie. You're
Yeah,
fine.
Sorry.
So I just
my computer.
brought Fiona in as well,
Okay.
so that
Hi, Fiona.
she can actually speak to the question that she had placed on there.
Okay.
So Fiona, if you'd like to unmute,
Hi, Fiona.
you would like Sean to explain the benefits of mushrooms for autoimmune diseases and not just as a prebiotic for the gut biome.
Hi, I hope I'm unmuted.
You are welcome.
You are.
Okay, well, thank
Welcome.
you,
Hi,
everyone.
Fiona.
I've just having a dog with inflammatory bowel disease. I have seen a lot of information about using medicinal mushrooms as a way to kind of, help modulate the immune system. I was just wondering if Sean could maybe kind of discuss that a little, like how that works or the benefits for other people who are listening who also have dogs with autoimmune disease.
Yeah, so these mushrooms basically they have a full nutrient profile. They have proteins, fats. A lot of the fruit body is pretty high protein. A lot of the fruit bodies of these mushrooms will get pretty high protein, fats, carbs, all that stuff. And just to kind of simplify, basically the active compounds, what they do is they signal or have an adaptogenic effect on our bodies. So basically, adaptogenic is a nice way of saying it. Allows our bodies to handle stress better. And then in terms of like the immunomodulating is sometimes, the marketing term that you see a lot is immune boosting. Well, you don't always need your immune system to be upregulated. It sometimes needs to be downregulated, especially if you're speaking to autoimmune issues. So basically, when we say immunomodulating, we're saying basically it's going to have this adaptogenic effect, meaning if your immune system is overreacting, it's going to help kind of downregulate that, and if it's underreacting, it'll upregulate that.
That's awesome.
Okay.
Did
that help,
address
Fiona?
your question, Fiona?
Yeah, and I'm assuming you just tend to recommend a blend, cordyceps and turkey tails and reishi and
Yeah.
recommend?
So they all kind of contain they have similar benefits in terms of like what you see in the research, but they do all have specific studies where, for instance, lion's mane has shown to be really helpful with like stress and depression. And at the same time, it helps with a lot of cognitive issues. So we like the research that each one has, but at the end of the day, having these blends, especially as we were talking about end of life and more severe things, I would probably want to go a much higher dose if we're talking about end of life or some of these more severe issues with an older dog or cat for that matter. But if you're just starting out, having a blend is really important because we get an entourage of benefits. So when I say entourage effect or synergy, typically, we add, 2 mushrooms, 1 + 1 = 2. Well, with synergy, 2 + 2 = 8. That's kind of the philosophy behind the entourage effect is when we incorporate more, we get an even better response, even in smaller doses. So we really like having these blends. If we could, we would do, probably 15 like we talked on the podcast, but at some point we got to be able to explain it, and we don't have all day to do that. And we know with these 5, there's some really positive studies coming out behind them in terms of their benefits. So when we relate that to pets, I know that there's not a ton of research on mushrooms for cats or dogs, but we still want to address that, and they're super safe for them. You virtually can't overdose. You might cause some digestive upset if you do too much, but from a safety standpoint, if we look at it just as like an edible food, extremely safe too.
Great.
You just real quick, you had mentioned that they needed to be cooked. Is there a problem with, you know, growing your own turkey tail mushrooms and giving it to them raw? Do they have to be cooked?
Yeah, they have to be cooked because they are extremely hard to break down. So when you eat a button mushroom on your salad raw, you're virtually getting no nutritional value out of that. But if you boiled it in hot water, you will be able to break it down in your body better. So, you know, if you did that with a dog, you'd probably see it come out in the stool and you'd see it pretty much intact still.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Okay, Fiona, did that address your question? We have another question from Ibal.
Yeah, that was great. I was just wondering though, I love the idea of feeding them fresh, but I was kind of always under the impression, because there's so many powdered brands on the market, is there a preference for one to the other?
In terms of the brand?
No, that there's a lot of powdered dried supplements for the mushrooms, or fresh, because I would love to just feed them fresh because I love mushrooms. Right. But is there a preference? Is one better than the other?
Yeah, so you really don't want to do raw mushrooms at all, because they're not going to be able to break them down. They're really hard. No,
sorry, I should have said cooked versus the powdered version that you can.
Yeah, so just boiling them as a fresh product would be the best way. But the powders themselves, like the powder that we use in our product, is hot water and then alcohol extracted, and then it is freeze dried. So basically, that brings out all of those active compounds that are in the mushrooms, and we need to do that in order for the animals and ourselves, because we make it for humans too, to be able to break down easier.
Okay.
I think the other thing, Fiona, for me, I don't know where everybody is from, but I live in Southern California, and it's not so easy for me to grow the mushrooms that I don't have access. I don't know where you are, but I'm with you. I always like everything, you know, as fresh as I can get it. But then I also start to realize that sometimes, you know, I may not be able to grow that kind or get that kind. And maybe the compounds are good for somebody in that kind of situation if you can't grow your own mushrooms. But I think Sean is saying, yes, that's your best alternative, or your best is to get them fresh, right? And then boil them. But if you can't and you want more of a compound, then these compounds are available and very good for them. Right, Sean?
Yeah, and they'll be more concentrated a lot of times. At least with ours, like we have a much more concentrated form of it. And, you know, if you're growing them yourself, you're going to want to have the mycelium as well, because the mycelium has just as many, if not more, active compounds. So a lot of companies talk about beta glucans as kind of being the main star of the show when it comes to the compounds that occur in mushrooms, but there are so much more to the mushroom, especially in the mycelium and their immunomodulating benefits. And the mycelium is basically just the mycelium never goes away, but the mushrooms only got like 5 days, and then they basically spoil and they rot. But that mycelium is there year round. It's you flip over a log in the forest and you'll see little white hairy strands. That's mycelium. And those are really where the most research is done on mycelium and the immune activating benefits.
Thanks, Sean. It looks like Carrie's. Oh, sorry, Carrie, go ahead.
No, I'm here. I was going to say, this is not a plug on this company, but I tried to grow my own mushrooms. I'm not being super successful. I just want you to know that. But I don't know if you guys can all see this. This is a little mushroom that I tried to grow in my facility, just mostly to spark interest for people to understand about mushrooms. But I thought the mycelium was the browner stuff. Am I wrong?
I'm sorry, you broke up a bit.
So like, this is my little kit. And if I break off a mushroom on here, underneath it is like some brown stuff. That's not the mycelium, or it is?
No, that is the mycelium. Yeah. So it's basically the roots of the mushroom. It's
It looks like mold.
it consumes dead stuff. So it's not as pretty as the mushroom oftentimes, but it consumes dead stuff. The mycelium is incredible. And if you just look into what mycelium actually does in the wild, it creates ecosystems and it keeps forests healthy. The biggest living organism in the world is in Eastern Oregon, and it is a mycelial network.
This is
Thanks. I
fascinating
am going
stuff.
to go ahead and I moved Fiona back into our attendees and going to bring up Ibal. She has had her hand up so that she can ask her question. There we go. You just need to unmute Ibal.
Thank you, Lori.
There you go.
For helping me. I'm not very computer savvy, unfortunately.
No, that's okay. That's what I'm here for.
Well, I have there's one thing that Sean was pointing out that I found extremely interesting. But Carrie, I wanted to tell you, come to New York, let's grow them between 2 skyscrapers. See how that works.
I'll do it.
Sean, you were saying about lion's mane, which I love that comment you made about it being mostly helpful for stress and depression. And IBD, and I'm sorry I'm talking about IBD because that's been my life's work. IBD has, there's been a link between gut-brain axis. So would you say that first, are there mushrooms that you would not necessarily recommend for IBD? And second, would you say perhaps incorporate that one daily? And can canine actually be on a medicinal mushroom supplement throughout without having to take them off it? Like, for example, we know that licorice root you don't want to give over a certain amount of time, or we know that golden seal you can only give up to, say, 2 weeks. Is it something that can take in an ongoing manner? And then one last part, and I'm sorry I'm a blabbermouth, but one last part is, what is the breakdown of the nutritional benefits that they give us, like as far as vitamins and minerals?
Like okay, so there's a lot there to kind of address. So I'm trying to I want to wrap up some of that. So you're asking, like, can they take the mushrooms consistently? I would say unequivocally yes, as long as there's not any reactions. And with IBD, it's tricky, you know. I think there's the tendency as a pet owner to want to do a lot of stuff, and I am guilty of this myself. I just had a dog pass from cancer, and you know, when we first got diagnosed, me being part of a company that makes products that can help with these kind of things, you know, I wanted to do everything. And so sometimes when we're dealing with these issues like IBD, which is not an easy issue to deal with, we want to throw a lot at there. You know, the one thing I would say is, you know, just from my own experience, is to try to limit the amount of things going in at once. So if you're going to go with a mushroom product, probably do just the mushroom product and the good healthy diet. And then maybe start incorporating some other things in smaller amounts if you're doing other supplements. But I think when we try to do, you know, a bunch at once with these issues, we can kind of shock the system and the body doesn't know how to handle that. So that would be one kind of just thought on the dosing part. As for our customers, I mean, we've been making this product for 4 years, and some of our customers do not take their animals off of it. They swear by it. And that speaks to the fact that it's helping them. It's not having any reactions. So, you know, from the standpoint of they're staying on it, it's a completely safe product, and they haven't had any reactions. That's really good to know. I think, you know, the amount they give probably goes up and down depending on the day schedule, you know, from your lifestyle standpoint, which is understandable. And then for the breakdown of nutrients, there's a lot of, okay, so it basically has a full macronutrient profile. You're going to get your carbohydrates, your fats, your proteins, your dietary fiber, on a dry weight basis. When the mushrooms are then, you know, they're heated through hot water and then freeze dried, on a dry weight basis, they're on average about 15% protein. Some can get up to 30%, and I don't know all the different specific protein levels. So I'm sorry if
They're different.
Yeah,
The different mushrooms have different protein properties, different fat properties.
Yeah, and they have amino acid profiles. The other thing that they contain are these polysaccharides, which some of them are called beta glucans, and that is one of the main things that creates the immune response in the gut. And then the other things, some other really funky words are like diterpenoids. There's a whole host of vitamins. I believe in some of the vitamins, if not a good majority of them, there's a full spectrum of vitamin D. And that's really important right now because they've shown with the pandemic and the virus that vitamin D levels are really important, especially in North America, where we're above the equator and we don't get as much sun. So there's a ton of nutritional value to them if you just take out all the modulating things, and it's not a bad supplement, I don't think, for from younger cats and dogs to older. Obviously with the older animals, we have a softer spot, and it's why we created the product. So we definitely think it's a good supplement to incorporate into the diet. Does that answer the question? I know that you had a lot of questions, so I wanted to touch on it.
Yes, Sean, as far as the nutritional value, yes. And I do understand about the vitamin D because I'm vegan. So most of mine actually comes from that. Not my dog, clearly. But the other thing is, I think you probably, with me bombarding you with questions, is the lion's mane and the gut-brain axis. Have you come across that? Are there any research done in that? Because you did say it's good, it's helpful for stress and depression, and gut integrity is utterly and completely related to stress and stress responses, especially in canines. Is there any research or studies that you can direct us to?
Yeah, so if anybody wants to find research, I'm just glad you brought up the research aspect of it, because I'll give everybody a completely unbranded resource to go to and really get to the bottom of all these different mushrooms and studies. And you'll see every mushroom that we use on there, and it'll have 10, if not 15 studies that you can reference. And it's called mushroomreferences.com. It's completely unbranded. It's just open access info. And it's a really good way to kind of wrap your brain around studies. Because sometimes if you read studies, they're a little bit tricky to read. And this will give people a little bit easier path to kind of, okay, let me look at the lion's mane. With the gut brain axis, I love talking about that because I think if you look at Ayurvedic medicine, they address the gut, that's where our health is rooted. So I think anytime we are taking something that has these prebiotic benefits and has these immune response activating benefits, we are going to help the brain work better. What they showed specifically, I know with lion's mane though, is they saw that there was it helped in the reduction of buildup of what causes Alzheimer's or dementia, forms of dementia. So they were giving it to these dementia patients, and they saw the slowing or the progression of these Alzheimer's symptoms. And there's some really cool studies on the cognitive issues with lion's mane. I like it specifically in relation to dogs, because I want to keep it back to them. I was going to tell you why I like it, but specifically for dogs, because we have a lot of CBD products out there in the market. There's so many of them that could be sedative, and that's not always desired for cats and dogs. They don't want to knock their dog out. And sometimes some of these CBD oils and treats and things like that can be more on the sedative side. What we find with the mushroom blend that we use is there's a much more calmer focus. So they don't have this sedative quality where they're just kind of knocked out or anything. They can actually go out on hikes, these older dogs that, have been active their whole life. And we see a little bit of a calmer focus, and they're able to do the things that, dogs do. And I think that speaks to the mushroom side of it, of we're not just trying to sedate dogs with a CBD product all the time.
Sean, thank you.
Yeah, no,
Yes.
Before we go any further, I just wanted to address the vitamin D issue. So just as a nutritionist, I have to say this: dogs don't synthesize vitamin D through the sun. So they absolutely have to get it through their diet, which is so interesting to me as a nutritionist, because it's been a long, like, I'm constantly trying to figure out where dogs are getting vitamin D. And I have been directing that more so to stuff like the mushrooms and things that they could be eating in the wild, because vitamin D doesn't come from a lot of meat sources. So as we dive further into learning about what our canines are doing, it's interesting to figure out how much they're eating. And when Sean talks about the vitamin D in the mushrooms, it just leads me back to that's where they're getting it from. But I wanted to clarify on the questions involved, because they were so great. So Sean says, yes, they can eat it throughout their life. It's more of a food source than a supplement, I think, more than anything. And that the proteins are about 15% on average, but those things vary back and forth. So I just wanted to kind of clarify that a little bit in case someone was wondering what the answer was to that coming in later. So that's just my take. You guys there? Did I lose you?
I hear you
I'm
guys.
here. I don't know if you can hear me.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure I clarified those things. Okay.
I thought I saw some questions come through on the
Yeah.
chat.
Lori,
There
I might
are,
have lost.
so I'm going to go ahead and move you in ball.
Thanks, Imbal.
And
Thank you.
thank you so much. And we did have a question in our chat that said from Jill, lots of vitamin D and other nutrients in the liver.
I think she's referring to that liver, like as like a treat, or feeding that to your dog actually has lots of vitamin D, because she was speaking to what Carrie was talking about.
Oh, she's talking about like in like liver. They can eat liver. So
Right.
yeah, it has to come from their food. But
Right.
the amount of vitamin D, and I'm really looking more towards some of the standards that are set out of how much vitamin D an animal is supposed to have. And then when I look at how much is sourced within their meat, it's just kind of a new research that I'm doing right now. So I just wanted to make it clear that we knew that dogs they have to get it from their food. So if they're not getting it, they can get some of their vitamin D from mushrooms, I think that's awesome.
So there is another question from Jill. Is there a risk of giving too much mushrooms?
Yeah, I think safety is like, it has to be the main kind of conversation first, because it's a different product, than you typically see for pets. So from a safety standpoint, there's no like overdosing or anything like that we know of. I haven't seen any toxic levels. It's different when we talk about wild mushrooms and the mushrooms that your dog could eat, on a walk. That I would probably, most certainly steer away from. But when you're talking about USDA organic edible mushrooms in a powder form, our facilities are all CGMP. We take great pride in the safety of the quality that we're using. And the only thing that we have heard, and this hasn't been with our product, because ours are in a capsule form and they're not a very big amount, but if you're giving like a lot of the powder in food, I have heard of dogs having some constipation. So that's the only real side effect I've heard. Other than that, I can't think of too many off the top of my head. And that's good. That's good news for us, in terms of, is there any risk with this? But yeah, if you're doing just a raw powder form and you're putting that in the food, you can get carried away and maybe cause some constipation.
So Sean, we have another question from Jill. Is it administered based on the pet's weight? Great question.
Yeah. So yeah, it is a really good question. So we really, so the way we took it, and again, this goes back to the lack of studies in animals, or specifically cats and dogs. And it seems like dogs come first and then cats come second, unfortunately. But really how we dose our product was, if you look at typical human suggested dosages, for the most part, we're right in line with them, or not, or if not, we are half of them, based on the weight of the animal. So if it's a bigger dog, it's typically going to be closer to that, that human suggested dose. But if it's a smaller dog, or a cat for that matter, we actually have a smaller pill that we will use, that'll be a little bit smaller dose, mainly because of the CBD that is in the product. We don't want to have a significantly higher dose of CBD for the little animals. And then for the bigger animals, we did want to put a higher dose in for that. And we just do that by weight. It's not an exact one size fits all dosage. The mushroom side, though, to kind of bring it back to that, what we see typically, is about a 0.5 gram or 500 milligram to 250 milligram dosage per day for pets is probably optimal to start. And if you want to increase, if you have something more aggressive that you're trying to help with, I think you can do that for about a week and gradually increase. The thing with botanicals and natural products like this is, don't be afraid to have a little bit of trial and error. We always suggest going, starting low and going slow, but you can always increase and kind of experiment with the dosage. We don't want to sit here and say, this dosage is going to fix all of the dogs and cats with this issue. It's really about knowing your pet and knowing how they're going to respond to it, because you're with them every day. And we'll give you a starting point, and then you can kind of experiment and gradually increase, or maybe just keep it at that maintenance dose if you need to.
Okay. We have another question here. From Imbal. What minerals are in them? Cal, phos, iron, etc. What about vitamin B complex? High in which B? Is there folate in them? B9 in parentheses.
I'd have to do like a full scan of what the vitamin complexes are in there. I actually don't know what the specific vitamins are. I know the ones that I've been like kind of keying in on, when we talk about these products, but that is a great question. I could probably get back to you with some answers on that. But off the top of my head, I don't know exactly, what the full vitamin complex would be that comes along with them. I'll tell you that they do probably vary from species to species. And then they probably would vary from product to product, because the food source that they're using for the mycelium to grow on can vary. And then that can probably create a different vitamin profile as well. So that's a really good question. And I actually, you just gave me a really cool topic to kind of dig into. And I'll definitely get back to you, and we can probably follow up with the group with that.
Great. Also, Ibal, we don't hate you. What's her
No,
last
No, I love
question?
it. I love it.
This
It's
is
really-
great. This is the purpose.
Yeah, and I think questions like that,
What?
we rarely get questions, but I think when you get them, it allows us to kind of expand on what we need to talk about, especially with what Yuval is talking about with the IBD. I mean, it's like I said, it's tricky, and it's tough to figure out kind of what, the benefits are.
IBD is such a growing problem that so many animals are suffering, and humans for that matter, and trying to understand all of it. It is really difficult. I loved your answer, Sean, about, because I know you and I had talked about how much people want to throw stuff in, and, the gut has to be we need to have a healthy gut. And if we're throwing so much at it at one time, we can do more harm than good. So simple can be so much better. I just love that answer. Just don't try to throw everything, especially end of life, right?
Yeah.
We get desperate. So
Oh, yeah.
it's
Jill
important.
also mentioned that she's thanking you so much, that this was very intriguing. So thank you, Jill, for joining us.
Thanks, Jill.
Jill.
Glad that we could help.
Yes.
So
Okay.
for our podcast listeners, this is the format that we are going to be putting together, and we'll have Sean on the show, I'm sure, in the future as well. But the format will always come as the release, and then within a few days, we'll be doing a Q&A. So if you are listening to this podcast, you're always going to have an opportunity to ask our guests any questions. So Sean just happened to be our first one that we decided to do it with, and we're so glad that he did, because that's the one part about doing a podcast, is then when you're listening, you're like, I want to know this. So I'm glad we have the opportunity to do this, and that we have people coming on that have some questions.
Yeah, I am so thankful that we got to get on and kind of elaborate. I listened to the podcast back just so I can kind of get some reference from what we're going to talk
Sure.
about. And one of the things I was thinking about is we didn't really give a lot of like tips to use our product. And I think that's one of the battles that sometimes, you order a capsule and it's like, how many people are comfortable pilling their animal? So we understood that. And we do suggest that they can open them up and mix in food. We prefer something wet or yummy, raw food, because then you can kind of mask it a little bit better. Because not dogs are going to be partial to eating a mushroom and hemp product. So I think, from a tips and tricks standpoint, for cats, I really like tuna juice. And Carrie, you can jump in on this too, but cats, I love tuna juice. I love bone broths. I love goat's milk. Those are all good ways to kind of open the capsule up and mix in. And this doesn't relate to ours. I mean, cats might not want just a regular mushroom powder either. But with ours specifically, I like those things. And then for dogs, I've gotten really creative with just wrapping it in cheese.
Sardine juice.
Yes,
Yeah, sardine juice. I think it's important that you brought that up though, Sean, because there are some capsules, particularly a lot of times your probiotics will come in a capsule, and they're time released capsules, and you cannot open them up. So it's important to know with this product you can, and put it and hide it in food if you can't get a capsule down, into your pet, especially cats. Boy, those guys, man, they're picky. Get anything by them.
Right.
I'm going to go ahead and quickly share out the website addresses for both of you for the attendees.
So Lori's going to put out some websites so that if you need to contact Sean, places that you can get a hold of him. Of course, you can always contact me if you have any questions or anything, but Lori's going to type those are going to be on the screen so that you guys can have them. While we're doing that, Sean, I want to ask you, I know we talked about it on the podcast, but it's something that I think almost every pet parent is dealing with nowadays, and that's allergies. And for those of the people who haven't listened to it, I know we've talked a little bit about IBD, thanks to Ibal. I'm so glad she brought that up, because that's another huge problem with our animals, and talking about some of the autoimmune diseases. But what...
Oh, she froze on me.
She did. It'll come back in a moment. Wonderful internet. We made it through almost the entire time though.
And she was just about to get to the nitty gritty of it. For pet allergies, again, they could be seasonal, environmental, they could be dietary. So, we have to figure out what the allergies are coming from. I think a lot of pets do suffer from, seasonal and environmental allergies, and those are tougher to figure out. I know right now a big topic that I've seen is some of the pharmaceutical side and the harsh effects a lot of those allergy meds have. And then on the other side, you have the over-the-counter drugs that we take for allergies and are also given to our pets, like Benadryl and stuff like that. I mean, where I come out on it is I want to do the natural product first, and I want it to be super safe and not have a ton of side effects. So I'm going to start with something like, a mushroom blend, and, specifically, Eastern medicine, Chinese medicine, has been using reishi mushroom cordyceps, things like that for, those seasonal itchy, scratchy, stuffy respiratory issues for, thousands of years. So they've got some pretty good backing on that. And then if you look at some of the studies on these mushrooms to back it, the scientific side, there's some really positive benefits that we can get from that. I know personally, I'll relate it to me just this one time, but like, I know personally, reishi mushrooms and cordyceps mushrooms are phenomenal. The way I can explain it is this, because it's better for me to explain it from my standpoint. I'm in Colorado, I get stuffy, I take it, I don't have like this immediate relief, but maybe like in a couple hours, I'll just like snap to and be like, wow, I don't feel as stuffy. I'm not as congested. And that's been my personal experience with dogs and cats that have allergies though. If they can stick with it and use some of these tips and tricks to get it in their food, I think they should see, a pretty good response within the first couple days. Especially with these mushrooms. And I think the fact that we have CBD in there, I think that's like an added boosted benefit. It's not really the star of the show, but it's in there for its benefits around kind of, acting on those inflammatory pathways that you're dealing with when you have allergies. And then from a standpoint, it's like, it's so hard to pinpoint, all the things that your dog can have a reaction to. They could just be a small intolerance, or it could be just the quality of the food that you're feeding. So I think dietary is a little bit tougher, but I think it definitely wouldn't hurt to maybe incorporate that and see how that works in conjunction with the food.
Yeah. I just wanted to point that one out in case, just anyone, if they're not listening to stuff, I just want them to know the value. I know I've been constantly telling my clients, let's start using these mushrooms for these problems, and I'm starting to get quite a bit of good feedback, so I'm excited about that. And just my own dogs are getting mushrooms, and I formulate diets for people, so I've been using mushrooms as part of their dietary stuff, just from the stuff that I've learned from you. So it's been really awesome. Lori, are you still there? Did we lose our person?
I saw she left us a message. I don't know if
I am still here.
Oh, good.
I put the message out there because we had a few minutes left, which was time enough for, one or two more questions from our attendees.
Okay.
Is all. So, but it doesn't seem like we have any additional questions.
Okay.
Any final words from Sean or you, Carrie?
Sean, go ahead, and then I'll wrap it up, I guess, and someone can ask a question if they want still.
I want to refer back to the podcast and what Jeremy said when he quoted Hippocrates. It's like, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. And I think that's really important. I'm glad Jeremy brought that up on the podcast, but it's like, that's how we look at it. We want to use these whole food supplements. We don't want to refine things, to these pharmaceutical style of drugs. We don't look at these as like a drug form. This is a whole food supplement that is super safe, and that's something we're really proud of, and we'll continue to do with all of our products. So if I can leave you with anything, it's just like, we have to look at food as the medicine first, because that's something we can control too. So thank you everyone for having me. I love doing this, and if you guys ever have any questions, you feel free to reach out to us on our website or our social media. You can find us, all the web stuff is on there, but our social media is pretty easy to find. It's Earth Buddy Pet. But thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Lori. I really appreciate you guys having me on, and everybody with the questions. They were awesome. And I'll follow up on the vitamin breakdowns too.
I'm real curious. I'm curious about that too, because it's just interesting for me when I'm helping people who want to cook at home, knowing exactly it is tough. They all have different, because I look at the vitamin stuff that's coming from, but the amount that you have to feed of mushrooms, to get what I need, I wish I could formulate a whole mushroom diet, but I can't, because I need to give more. But I just want to thank you, Sean, for coming here. And Lori, thank you for setting this up. I am not a techie person, so this would not even be possible without Sean and Lori. I kid you not. literally I'd be talking to a wall right now. So I just want to thank you guys both for being here and watching the show. And I hope my goal and bringing Lori on to help me, both of us, our goal is just like Sean's. We want to provide you the best information we can as far as whole food supplements and whole food. And exactly like you said, I say it all the time, let food be thy medicine, because medicine is not good, I guess. We can't keep giving ourselves medicine, and so we can find that in our food. So I appreciate people like Sean and Jeremy who are out there doing the research and giving us the studies. So I really appreciate that, you guys, and thank you so much. Thank you all for coming on. I hope that we will continue to grow this relationship and be able to have these Q&As with you from the podcast, and we can grow together. So I hope this was educational to everybody. And I'll
Thank
see
you
you guys.
so much, Carrie and Sean. This has been great. And thank you, everybody, for your fantastic questions.
Yeah.
You gotta love a great topic that spurs thoughts and generates those questions for more information. So we really appreciate you sharing this time with us, and have a great rest of your evening.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.